Kyle here from allmediareviews.blogspot.com. It's been a little while, but I'm here to get back into the random artist features. Today I'm going to do it on Pure Reason Revolution for various reasons, but they're broken up. But I just tell my story, that kind of stuff, and show my collection or a percentage of my collection. So I first heard about them at the end of 2005. Specifically a couple message boards, one being on Mike Portnoy's forum, another one was Porcupine Tree, the fans forum, and they were just going crazy over some of the music they had. They hadn't put out a full-length album. They formed actually, just backstory with them to an extent, they formed at Westminster University, I believe it is, University of Westminster. At least two or three of the key members, one being John Courtney, one of the male singer, and I think he played guitar. The other being Chloe Alper, who played guitar, bass, and keyboards, I know, and then of course she also sang some lead and background vocals. Their drummer, Jamie Wilcox, I believe his name is, also may have been at the university, and some of the other members as well. But that was the core, those are the core members of the group that I always think of. Anyway, but progressive rock, modern progressive rock, they had a very heavy, like, psychedelic vocal harmonies, that kind of stuff. A lot of layers, a lot of like interplay between male and female vocals and guitars, like thick, punchy riffs, that kind of stuff. So I'm just gonna get into the discography though. The first thing that I got from them was it was known as a mini album. Maybe the first time I ever seen the term mini album on MySpace. I remember them saying that it's called Cautionary Tales for the Brave. And this was sometime in 2005 it was released. It had a number of tracks that ended up on their debut album, the various forms of the debut album that came later, but I think probably the song that probably grabbed me the most initially was the song Bright Ambassadors of Morning, which is kind of an epic of sorts. But yeah, this is that. I can even read this quick. Sensational. Final proof that prog is no longer a four-letter word from Enemy. One of the greatest new bands in Britain. Magical rock sound. London's own Mini Floyd, the Floyd thing. Anyway. And came in an odd case, this black case if you look at it. But here's your artwork and that kind of stuff. So this was it was like 35 minutes, so it wasn't really a full-length album in some respects, but it wasn't like a really short EP. It also had, what was it, In Aurelia? The Attention Craft, which is another one of my favorites, which I'll just mention in a few minutes here, but they did release this, which is a compilation I just found because I was just eating everything up that I was hearing from them. I wanted to get it. It had, this is a thing called, this compilation, Pop Tones, the cassette played Pop Tones, and with a bunch of bands. It's one of these sampler CDs. And I don't even remember how much I paid for it. I didn't pay a fortune for it, but I probably did pay $6 or $7 perhaps. Had Apprentice of the Universe, that's right. And that was on their MySpace. I remember that specifically, and that was the song that maybe almost impressed me the most. So this compilation doesn't really have any other bands that went on to anything that I'm aware of, but Boxer Rebellion maybe. Anyway, so then it was like, I want to say March or April, they released their debut album, and they were signed to Sony Records, and I thought, wow, this band, while I love them, actually I got the attention of a major label. And I thought, and they were supposed to play at South by Southwest too, I think it was, but I don't know if that actually ended up happening. Either that or they ended up playing at South by Southwest in 2005, before I ever knew about them, because that was in March. So, but this is the Dark Third, the version that was the UK version, I believe, and my condition of the CD's taken a little bit of beating. I don't remember what happened to it, but anyway, the biggest note about the Dark Third is that it's various versions. Yeah, this thing is not in good shape. It came out in different versions with different track lists over the next year and change, because there was an American version that Sony released, obviously, with a different track list. But this version that I have here, I think still is my favorite among all the versions, but it has some of the songs from Cautionary Tale for the Brave, but it also includes some of the best songs not from that version, or that album, that EP rather. Specifically the Twinsen Trembling Willows, which is just crazy. It's probably still remains my favorite thing they ever did. It's got this crazy vocal, like, battle almost, just back and forth between the different vocalists and the harmonies. And it's very intricate, very fast enunciation of a lot of the lyrics. I don't even know what the lyrics actually are, but they work, they harmonize really well. And that's maybe their most technical song on this album, at least. Also, songs like Voices in Winter wasn't on the Cautionary Tales, and The Princess of the Universe, which I had on that sampler thing, but it wasn't on the EP. What else? The Bright, let's see here, the Exact Color, which is sort of a ballad, very textured, I always think of like kids playing on a playground or something. And Bullets Dominate, which is another ballad. So it had a very like textured synth bass, at times ambient elements. Of course, the Bright Ambassadors of Morning is a reference to the Pink Floyd song Echoes, lyric at the very end of it. And just Pink Floyd was all over this record in such a good way. Also the Beach Boys and some other. John Courtney wrote a paper when he was in college, talking about how Brian Wilson was a genius, which he wasn't the first one to say that. I also wanted to mention, around this time I was researching their backstory, and they had a couple bands. Well, they originally were known as the Sunset Sound, and they had like a demos or something like that I ended up coming across maybe on their website, and they were fantastic too. It was a little lighter, a little more like just pop oriented stuff, but it was really good. I haven't listened to that stuff in a long time, but I bet you some of it's on YouTube. But the other thing is, Chloe Alper had been in a band called the Period Pains before joining the Sunset Sound, maybe when she was even in high school. And they even covered, I think, a Spice Girls song. It was sort of like a parody. They either covered it or they did a parody. I can't remember. But so then they released, I think it was later in 2006, the American version of The Dark Third. And the track list, I'll show it. It has the opening track, Aeropause, which is just an instrumental synth part. A couple tracks were different. Nimbos and Tambos, which is a very catchy, sort of almost danceable track at points. Not really danceable, but it's had like a very synth, sort of high energy element to it that I don't think too much on the UK version had. The Intention Craft also, which was on Cautionary Tales, but wasn't on the version that came out in the UK of The Dark Third in April. This came out, I think, in like July or August. If I'm not mistaken, Goshen Remains might have been on the original. Oh, okay, it was, which is another favorite. But anyway, so it was interesting to have two different versions of this just terrific debut album. And then, of course, they eventually released a version in 2007, a double disc version, which included all the tracks that were not on one of the others. And then it also has a second disc, which has a couple tracks in Aurelia, which was on the Cautionary Tales from the Brave. Because I'm sure people that stumbled across some of these versions didn't have all the songs. They maybe got them on iTunes or something like that, or digitally. But this, I guess, I consider sort of the definitive version, because you get basically all of their best early songs, and you do get, might even be even better. I kind of almost consider it a favorite at the same point as Trembling Willows. The track on the second disc, Golden Clothes, which is like this 9.5 minute epic, but again very synth driven, very almost trip hoppy. But it builds and then eventually gets to this cool, really fast section. And it has a lot of the trademark Pre-Erosion Revolution vocal harmonies, of course. Very dreamy vocal harmonies. And so I can also show at this, and I got this a couple years ago, they did issue a vinyl version of The Dark Third, which, looking at it, I think this is a mixture, actually, just looking at the track list, as you can see, of the two versions. I mean, the artwork looks like the 2007 double disc version. It doesn't have, it has some of the bonus discs. It does not have Golden Clothes on it, though, but it has Borgens Vor, which is another sort of experimental synth-driven track. But I guess it resembles more of the American version because it has the Intention Craft on the side C, But the side D is the bonus tracks, which includes the exact color, which is I think of for the British version. So I don't know. You get in love with one album and they just issue very different tracks. It's kind of like the Beatles albums. You know, they had what was it, Magical Mystery Tour, and like Hendrix too. Also, some of those '60s albums, the American versions had completely different track lists, and it was just you'd have to get them all. Really, they released them in a box set. It's 180 gram, you know, standard black vinyl, but one of my favorite albums of all time, The Dark Third. And sadly, I think Purism Evolution really always will be known for this one record. They're not around anymore, of course, and nice jackets, and of course we get all the lyrics. It does not have Golden Clothes like I just mentioned, unfortunately, but it has Trembling Wills, I believe. So. But yeah, this one record, they're pretty much known among progressive rock fans, and of course this was the only record they released on Sony, and Sony then proceeded to drop them. They did play in Nearfest, Northeast Art Rock Festival in 2007. Unfortunately, I didn't go, and I think they played a couple of their shows in the Northeast area in America, but at that point they never really returned to the U.S. But they still, obviously, were still a band. And so they, in 2008, like the condition of my copy isn't great, but they put out their second full-length album called, why am I blanking on the name of this? Amor Vincit Omnia, and my bonus disc is, I think, in a book or something like that. This album, you know, the Golden Clothes bonus track, I think, was sort of a sign of things to come. Was more synth-driven, more keyboard-driven, and I don't say more danceable, but I guess it kind of was in some respects. It has the single Victorious Cupid, which I think actually when they played at Nearfest, they played that song, and they released it as a live album. That Nearfest live album was on there. But the lyrics talking about love and stuff. Look at this book. It's very sort of spacey and like artsy, you know, photography and stuff like that. But as far as the other, you know, the rest of this album goes, I do really like it. It was one of my favorite albums from 2009, but it definitely was different. I'll just don't bother with the booklet. I should know this off the top of my head, but there was one song that really had a Nine Inch Nails element to it, and I'm thinking it was, I'm trying to remember which one. Deus Ex Machina. Deus Ex Machina, which is, there's a term for that, it's a Latin term. But yeah, there's a very industrial element to that song. Disconnect, the Gloaming is sort of an epic. It has a lot of kind of crazy, almost very thick, heavy synths on it. And then, was it Apogee, which is part of a suite called Keep Me Sane / Insane, I think. Track 3. Oh, no, not that one. It's just Apogee, my bad. This is not the most legible thing, as you can tell. But yeah, I mean, it's sort of, they had the vocal harmony still, but, and some of the classic parts of their sound I really enjoyed. However, it was stylistically, it was definitely more in a trip hop synth direction. And all right, if I can remember when this came out, but I'll just go on. So then it turned out the next year, that was in 2008, 2009, they put out another. That was 2008? Yes, I was wrong about that. 2009 they put out, no, I'm wrong again. This is 2009, so this was actually 3 years after The Dark Third, Amor Vincit Omnia. But in 2010, their final record was just the year after they put out an album called Hammer and Anvil, which was probably more resembling Amor Vincit Omnia, their second record, but it's kind of, they were going more in like a, I don't know, modern rock side. They had more like stoner kind of elements on some of this album, but it still includes a number of good tracks, experimental tracks. Blitzkrieg was one. Black Morning, that was kind of heavy, but I mean, it wasn't really heavy per se for them. It just was a heavy song. The song Armistice, if I'm not mistaken, Open Insurrection was great, and then Armistice. Open Insurrection reminded me of Nine Inch Nails again a little bit. But Armistice is one of the most dreamy, sort of ballady, melancholy songs that they ever did. You know, and that was, I guess they kind of knew maybe at the point they released this album that their time was sort of, you know, not, their time as a band was limited. And it was a good last track if this is the last thing they ever did to end on. I do actually do also have the single, which was for a benefit, I think, too, for Victoria's Cupid, and it's got some acoustic versions of Nimbus and Tamos and the Intention Craft. But yeah, so that's about all I can really elaborate on Pure Reason Revolution. But they were around for 7, 8, 9 years, and now the members are doing other things. Chloe Alper's done a couple different projects she started, but didn't really seem to fully, pursue. And now she's, I think, kind of in a more permanent spot with this band called Tiny Giant. And they put out a single in the last month, and I think they're supposed to put out at least an EP or a full length this year. And then John Courtney has a band called Bullet Height, which I forget the member, a singer from Sammy Dawn, I think it is. Yeah, and I forget what band it is she's from. But musically, both of their projects, their bands, do resemble some of the later Pure Reason Revolution stuff. But I'm hoping that they'll have their own identity at the same time, which they probably will. But they supposedly ended on good terms, so we may see a Pure Reason Revolution reunion. But if not, they left us with a lot of great music, especially the Dark Third and all the different versions of it. And if you've never heard them, if you're a fan of Porcupine Tree or obviously Pink Floyd, that kind of stuff, Zeppelin, they have Zeppelin elements in there, Queen or the Beach Boys, vocal harmonies, modern rock. They even have obviously like a Nirvana or kind of grunge influence at points, but they don't have a lot of the vocal styles of grunge. So, but thank you for watching. Bye.